Historical.
Well, I didn't have a television growing up, Babcock, so I'm a pop culture troglodyte.
Okay, Mayor Stevens, we are now live.
Great. Thank you and welcome everybody to this East Lansing City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Bacon.
Present.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
And Mayor Stevens.
Here. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as of now, or I'll look for a motion?
Move approval of the agenda from the September 20.
No, this is approval of the agenda. Not
Oh, I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All right, seconded by Councilmember Watson. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the regular special city council meeting from September 22nd. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes from the September 22nd meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Bacon. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Now we're on to communications. Our first part of communications is just an announcement for written communications. I did, receive an email last week that something wasn't included, or not last week, a week before last week, that something wasn't included on the written communications. Again, just send those requests to me. We'll make sure it's on there. I know even today we got a couple of emails that were after 5 p.m. I want to say, that were to the council account, and I just want to make sure that folks know that that will be reflected on the next city council meeting. But Emily, our assistant to the city council, will put up the written communications before then. So those are all posted on the agenda. Please let me know if something is not on there. And just as a note, I think the written communications link is under communications from the audience, and must just be a random error, which is fine. Okay, next item on our agenda is communications from the audience. Emily, will you let in anybody that is here to speak to us?
All right, caller with the phone number ending in 963. You are now permitted to address council.
Pass, thanks.
All righty. Emily, would you mind letting in the next caller?
Okay, it looks like that is our only caller that we had on the line.
Okay. If other folks are trying to call in right now and they're not able to, or they're having trouble, just let me know. Shoot me maybe an email, and I can, or me and maybe Emily an email, and we can try to get you in. I'm happy to let folks talk if they desire to. Although we do have a public hearing later on the agenda, if that is the item that you are here to speak about. Next item is communications from the mayor and council members. I'm going to take a point of privilege. Normally, I will go around the room first, but I'm going to try and start out this time. I've got a couple of things that I wanted to mention very specifically. One, I'd like to welcome Mike Homier, who is on the call with us today, our new city attorney, at least their representative from Foster Swift. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And as a condition of this wonderful first day, I'm going to already start asking you questions on our public meetings. So I would love if you could give us a little bit of a rundown, and the public a little bit of a rundown of kind of the Supreme Court decision that went through this past week and the responses of that. I know we don't know everything right now, but the effects of that, and just very briefly go through it during your report, which is item 2.5, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Great. Next acknowledgement is we have on our agenda today a resolution acknowledging Indigenous Peoples Day. And I want to state on the record, the City of East Lansing occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples land seceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day for a reason rather than Columbus Day. But I think it's also important to acknowledge the land that which we are all on right now, and the land that was taken before. And so I just want to acknowledge that publicly now, although we will be passing a resolution later on that. I wanted to read that into the record. And I'm going to try and do that as much as I can during city council meetings, because it's not just this meeting, but it's every meeting that we are on this land. Next item is something a little bit more personal to me. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with East Lansing specifically. Some of you might have seen a statement that I put out on a conflict that's happening in the Middle East right now. For those of you who don't know, I am Armenian. I am half Armenian, half Indian, but I am Armenian. The Armenian people have suffered a lot of great heartache at the hands of many other people. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional here, and I'm going to try not to. But last week, there was a conceded attack placed on Artsakh, a country that is currently fighting for independence. This is home to many Armenian people, and the country of Azerbaijan launched an attack on this country, bombing several cities and hurting many citizens, innocent people. I got the opportunity to visit that country under military escort last year, where I met with the president of that country with a group of US officials, heard about their struggles, heard about how for decades they have tried to peacefully gain independence. A fundamental principle of being an American is the right to self-govern and the right to exist, quite frankly. And they were fighting for that right. And now they are being attacked again because of it. And it is with a very heavy heart that I sit here knowing that there are people out there that are dying for that right now. And not dying just for death, but for that right. So I want to send a message, even though I don't know if it'll reach there, but I reached out to a couple of families that I know in the region whose sons and fathers are now on the front lines and might not make it back, that I stand with them. And I strongly condemn those actions. And I hope that a peaceful solution will come to the fold soon. I also want to acknowledge we had a loss in the East Lansing community as well, John Kloswick. I mentioned him last week as somebody who is suffering some health issues. But I wanted to acknowledge him here today because I think that we live in a great time of access to information and access to your city council members and your local government. But I remember when I first got elected to the city council, and I always, and I think the city manager probably knows this, I would say I want more public input every single time. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, because you can want public input all you want, but if it's not there, then can't really do much about it. But John Kloswick was at every meeting. He might not have spoken at every public comment. In fact, I don't know how he felt about me, quite frankly, because he didn't speak that much, but he was at every meeting, and he was always there watching over the city council and being an active part of his community. So John and your family and everybody else that was close to him, thank you for your service to the community and being a part of this community. There's a lot of issues that we're dealing with right now, and I'm glad to see as much public comment as there is. But previous to some of this stuff going on, we didn't have that, and I always appreciated folks that would show up to our meetings. So thank you for that. Okay, I have maybe a couple more things that I want to ask later on, but I asked our city attorney to kind of go through some of the COVID response stuff, and I think other people are going to be addressing their own thoughts on that, and I'll wait to address things as they come up as items on the agenda. So now I will go around the room. Councilmember Babcock, your comments.
Thank you. This has been a week for loss for us. I would like to acknowledge the passing and the fantastic life of Father Folio. Father Jake Folio was a fixture in this community for half a century. He was my favorite childhood priest at St. John's Student Parish, and really a truly wonderful man. The Catholic Church, the word Catholic with a small c means universal. And no one was a more universal source of love and kindness and joy than Jake Folio. He was the tiny, almost elfin man you saw on the sidelines of MSU basketball and football games. You might have seen him chatting up his regular conversation mates and the employees at MSU FCU. He loved to buy flowers. He was a regular at B&A Florist, where he always just had to get one more flower. And he truly was just a source of great love. He was 91 years old when he died. He had taken holy orders. It would have been 60 years next June. And he will truly be missed, but beyond being missed, I think he's a great example of what we all can be every day and so often maybe forget to be. So the Spanish word adios means goodbye, but if you break it down, it's adios, as in go with God. And Father Folio, you were a man of God when you were here. You truly were, and I am sure you were. I'm sure you are with God now. And adios, Jake.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I think most of my feelings tonight are probably going to be addressed when we talk to our new city attorney regarding the recent Supreme Court decision, Michigan Supreme Court decision. I'm frustrated by that. I think so. I think it's also kind of widely maybe misunderstood, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more guidance from that from our attorney. But I think regardless of the mechanism of that specific vote, it is evidence of a division within our state of people who have, to put it, I could think maybe mildly differing attitudes towards the severity of this virus that we're living with. I think personally, I have been in the trenches on this since March, both as a small business owner and then obviously as a city council member, and now as a mother with children who are doing remote school from home. So I'm feeling it from three different sides. I think that we have evidence locally that relatively minor adjustments to our day-to-day lives can have major effects on the transmission of this virus, specifically covering your faces when you go out. The fact that something that is so mild in terms of personal inconvenience has become a point of division that's being used politically is extremely disheartening to me. I think that if nothing else, we should be able to come together around preserving the lives of our citizens. And it seems that that is not possible right now, which is pretty devastating. So I appreciate when I see our citizens out with their masks on. I appreciate our citizens engaging with the businesses that they patronize respectfully, both to keep other clients safe and also the people who work in those jobs. And so for those of you who are continuing to uphold that, I want to express my sincere appreciation. I personally, and I believe the rest of this council, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I believe that we have a continued commitment to uphold health and safety. And so regardless of what happens outside this municipality, I think that I can tell you that we've got your back as much as we can, as much as we are legally able, which is another point of frustration. Just the fact that there is only so far that we can go in curtailing liberties, even if they are relatively minor, such as covering your face. So that's my, I guess, less joyful news. I also, on a less joyful note, I wanted to echo Aaron Stevens' condolences to John Clauswick's family. It's going to be really strange when we are finally able to meet in person again to look out into the audience and see the lack of John, because he was such a steady person at our meetings. I enjoyed kind of following up with him after council meetings when we were both in the audience together. Usually those were very short conversations, but he always had very poignant observations. So I wanted to express to his family that that is a significant loss to all of us. And then on a more positive note, I wanted to just give a kudos to our city clerk's office, who is kicking butt in terms of getting ballots out and out to our citizens, and early voting ballots returned. For those of you who are a little bit nervous maybe about the distancing and making sure that you have space between people, I wanted to point you towards the satellite office in the Hannah Community Center. That is relatively newly opened. It's open 9 to 4. It's in the banquet room. There's a lot of space there for you to spread out so that you do not have to feel anxious about how close you are to other people. There's a secure ballot drop box there as well. So if you have any problems, questions, there's a lot of misinformation circulating about early voting and absentee voting. If you have received an absentee ballot and have either marked it incorrectly or have decided that you would rather vote in person, you can still do that. You just have to let the clerk's office know that you want to spoil that ballot and exchange it. You have lots of options right up until election day. So, and the clerk's staff is very helpful and knowledgeable in terms of sorting through misinformation and getting you your constitutional right to cast your ballot. So letting you know that you've got options. So that's all I've got for tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Bacon.
Yes, I also want to start out by sending my condolences to Father Folio. Close ties to East Lansing football due to all the Michigan State guys that we have on our staff. And there's a lot of love, a lot of we have 3-4 generations of guys with ties to Michigan State. And there's a lot of conversation about him on the field today. And just, you don't make it that many years across generations without being a great man. So just sending condolences there. On this issue of COVID, and I came into this position under the guise of public health and safety over the top of everything else that goes on here. And as far as I go from this position, this is up to the public, anything that we can do to protect the public. This is a hill for me politically or otherwise that I'm willing to die on to keep the public safe. It's not, we will use every mechanism within our power to keep people safe within the reason of the law and the rules. But this is a lack of leadership at a lot of really, really high levels. And I apologize to you for that lack of leadership, but on the local level here in East Lansing, we will do everything in our power to keep the citizens safe. I was always taught power was given to you to protect the weak. I want to put on the record another sad day, the name of Jonathan Price, another African-American male, dead today at the hands of law enforcement. This is this is probably second only to public health and safety, the reason that I was interested in these roles, just changing the way that we show up and the way that we arrive on the scene, the way that we are as a community of East Lansing. So we don't have these days in our community. It's a very sad day. Obviously, once again, national referendum around this issue is all around us, but on a local level, we are convening and getting to work on the things around what I consider another area of public health and safety that we will find solutions around and create new ideas and get better around, because these sad days are piling up. So that's all for me.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Watson.
Hi, everybody. I have two things. I have a statement I have to read because I'm refinancing my home, and because of my appointment to City Council and my involvement with Capital Area Housing Partnership. I have to publicly announce kind of what's going on. So I have some things to read. In 2015, I was a participant in the City of East Lansing's Homeownership Assistance Program, or the HOPE program. It's federally funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Development Block Grant Program. Through the HOPE program, I was able to apply for and receive forgivable grant funds in the form of a second mortgage, which provided me with a down payment assistance towards the purchase of my house in East Lansing. At the time of my participation in the program, I did not serve as a city council person or any leadership position in East Lansing city government. I also did not serve on any boards or commissions at that time that were affiliated with Capital Area Housing Partnership. Now, I currently serve as a city council member as well as on the board of directors of the Capital Area Housing Partnership. And I'm seeking a subordination request from the City of East Lansing in order to refinance my home. By refinancing my house, I get a lower interest rate and pay less money monthly. However, it should be noted that if this is granted, the subordination, the total balance due back to the HOPE program will not be reduced financially. As subordination requests are generally reviewed and received and signed by the city manager, and I serve as an employer of that position, I'm making a public disclosure of a possible conflict of interest. In addition, during an upcoming city council meeting, I will request that my colleagues on city council please consider approval of a business agenda item which would grant the city manager's office authorization to execute my proposed subordination agreement. If city council authorizes the execution, this information goes on to HUD. There's a statement from the city attorney's office that follows along with that, and also the recognition of the conflict of interest.
Thank you.
And my second comment, just one second, I'm toggling around. My second comment, also in 2015, I learned that I had breast cancer. So I stand here with you all today because it's October and I have my scarf on to honor Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Early detection became very important in my life, and it's an important endeavor for any woman that might possibly, or man that might possibly have breast cancer. So today, I'm sorry, my screen kind of shut down. I wear my scarf, and this entire month is spent supporting the fighters, admiring the survivors, and honoring the taken.
Thank you, Dana. It is a privilege to be part of this council, truly. I know that we have a few people that joined actually for public comment, and I received that from our assistant to the city council. So I'm going to request before the city manager's report that we have those folks be able to chime in on public comment. Emily, would you mind letting them in? Sorry, George.
Caller with the phone number ending in 531, you are now permitted to address council.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Sorry, this is my first foray into this style of meeting.
All good.
My name is Michael Mansour. I'm the general manager at Spartan Spirits. We've been a staple in the downtown East Lansing community since 1991, almost 30 years. And we have been bringing the adult community of East Lansing, students, community, all together through beverage for almost 30 years. Recently, I was notified that Walgreens Corporation is going to be petitioning for a beer and wine license in the downtown area, where they are going to be occupying space near People's Church at Abbott and Grand River area. I was boggled to hear that Walgreens is going into the new build to begin with. We have another pharmacy, but that's not why I'm here today. I was even more bewildered that they are requesting a beer and wine licensing, packaged beer and wine licensing, when we have CVS, Target, 7-Eleven, Jonah's, my store Spartan Spirits, all in the immediate area, as well as El Azteco and Peanut Barrel, perhaps some other businesses as well, I'm not sure, have packaged licensing to go from their establishments. Also, there's a Quality Dairy and a Big Ten not far off, one at Harrison in Michigan, and there's a Big Ten that just opened back up. I don't know if they're under the name Big Ten, but they just opened up next to Admiral Station on Grand River Avenue. I'm concerned because the thinning of this market will ensure that the small businesses in the same market are going to be eliminated from downtown. The trend I'm starting to see forming by way of Target is that these big companies are going to come in and sell at low margins, eliminating the small business from existence. I am curious when that trend is going to cease. I'm curious as to what is the city council prepared to do for small business community amidst the COVID crisis, one that will have a positive effect on the small businesses in downtown. And I urge council to vote against this decision. I am finished. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any council members have any questions on this? Great. Emily, would you let in the next caller? Thank you for calling in, sir.
Caller with the phone number ending in 954, you are now permitted to address council.
You may have to hit *6 to unmute yourself to address council. Oh, there we go. Please go ahead whenever you're ready. Caller ending in 954, you are live with council if you'd like to speak with us. Caller ending in 954, I'm gonna say it just one more time. If you'd like to speak with us, you do seem to be unmuted, so I do not know what the issue might be.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll start over. Bonjour. This is Nicole Biber. I'm calling about the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution. I'd like to say miigwech. Thank you to Elaine Hardy, who wrote the resolution largely, for her research, her directness of speech, and for inviting my thoughts as an Anishinaabe to see it as valuable to include and remember and recognize Indigenous peoples. So from words, of course, must come action, but the saying itself is also important. And so with this resolution and future land recognitions, and I can help you later, Aaron, with the pronunciation if you like, but that speaking, that saying can, I hope, and I also urge, be associated with a call to awareness and action, specifically for institutions and for private individuals to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day by resolving to respect all our relations. That's our human family, but also our non-human relations. The short version is I'd like people to commit to no longer using chemical pesticides or herbicides in lawn care. 7 grandfather teachings that are referenced in the resolution, and one of those is respect. In our language, it's manajidwin, and that means to go easy on one another and on all of creation, all of the natural world, and that's something that's reciprocal. We've not been easy on our relatives. Looking at the pollinators again, I always think of a beekeeper I heard, and he was talking about how season after season there's been 50% loss of his beehives. And he made an analogy with the cattle industry. Imagine if in America and around the world, 50% of herds were lost every year. There'd be an uproar, especially if we found out the reason they were dying was because it was in their food. That's what's happening with our pollinators. It's the chemicals that are killing them. And it's also habitat loss. But to think of these chemicals, it's something for profit and for nominal, that means in name only, convenience. Another of our teachings, the basan vizuin, that means humility. It's in our thoughts to think lower of ourselves in relation to all that sustains us. So that within our teachings too, it was, I'm sorry, my son here. It's thinking lower of ourselves. We were taught that we're the younger brothers, our elder brothers of the plants and the animals and the insect world. That's central to our teaching. To me, in my opinion, it's the core teaching required by our current dire straits. Our word for insects is monodones. The creator referred to as the great good, Giche Monodo. Monodones is the diminutive of that, so it's little spirit beings. And they require biodiversity to survive. And so when they're around, those little spirit beings, they're so crucial and important because it shows the biodiversity is alive, not only in our body, as we rely on the floor, but also in our spirit and our heart. So people might think, how do I do that? Maybe you're used to chemicals. Maybe you haven't thought of it. Luckily, we're a pollinator-friendly community here in East Lansing. You can Google East Lansing pollinator-friendly communities. It's made very easy, and I'll say miigwech to Kathy DeChambeau, for actions that can be taken by individuals. And I'd also say for the city, for Indigenous Peoples Day, I'd like to see you eliminate pesticides and increase habitat. Encourage that. Challenge your business partners to do the same. My people's history is one of loss. Think about the clear cuts. I think about our spirit traditions. It wasn't until 1978 that we were allowed to have our spiritual practices again. They were no longer outlawed. Ongoing species loss and unquestioned development of our dwindling green spaces. How do we rectify that? We can heal the original and ongoing wound of ecological devastation and the erasure of our people. So I hope I have a little time there. I have been in contact with Reverend Bill, who's over at the Universalist Unitarian Church.
30 seconds remaining.
Oh, and I was talking to him about how with boarding schools, that forced assimilation, it's a continued normalization now of industrial approaches to our social and earth relationships. It's like our teachings are still being siloed away. There's not many of us left, and that was purposeful. We're seen as expendable, but those teachings and actions are available to everyone. We saw you.
Thank you, Nicole. Emily, do we have any other callers called in?
Caller with the phone number ending in 145, you are now permitted to address council.
Caller ending in 145, you might have to hit *6 to unmute yourself to address council. One more time, caller ending in 145, area code 847. If you'd like to hit *6, you will be able to address council. Alrighty, then I will pass it back to the regular agenda. Is that all the callers, Emily?
Yes, it is, Mayor. However, caller with the phone number ending in 145 did specifically reach out via email and I believe possibly wanted to speak.
Okay. Well then we can troubleshoot for a second. I'm fine with that as well. Again, caller ending in 145. If you hit *6 on your phone, you should be able to address the full council. I still see you as muted on my screen. For those watching at this point, I do say hit *6 in my sleep nowadays, so just let it know. No. Emily, do you know by any chance what the topic was, if it was on the public hearing or not?
Yep. He's here for Walgreens. So.
Okay. We're gonna have a public hearing on that, and they will have an opportunity to speak then. If there are any troubleshooting measures that we can take to help them out, that'd be great. I apologize. You are in the room, and I just still see you as muted, so I do apologize, caller. But we will have another opportunity to speak directly on that issue. I will move this over now to the city manager's report. City manager, I know you have a couple of things.
Yep. Thank you, Your Honor. So just a couple of welcomes. Welcome to City Attorney Mike Homier. We had a chance to have Mike in and meet with our directors and had our first meeting together as staff on Monday. Very productive, had a chance to talk about the things you want to hear about as well, which is the executive orders and such. So very useful conversation. Look forward to working with Mike in the months and years to come. Also want to welcome our new police chief, Kim Johnson, to the City of East Lansing, actually welcoming him back because he's a 30-year veteran. He started yesterday, as we said in our press release and our introduction to council a couple of weeks ago. He's actually on the call. He'll be available to answer questions, but we won't have him make any presentation at this point. Council will get to hear more from our new chief in the weeks and months to come, and so will the community. So welcome to Chief Johnson. We're very happy to have him aboard. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And welcome, Chief. City Attorney's report.
Good evening, and thanks for allowing me to attend this evening. I know it's my first official council meeting, but I look forward to many more. I want to, Mayor Stevens, answer your questions as directly as I can, knowing that there's still a lot of information that's unknown revolving the decisions or decision issued by the Supreme Court. And that's because the Supreme Court ruled that under the Emergency Management Act, the governor did not have the authority to issue any executive orders after April 30. And in conjunction with that, under the Emergency Powers of Governor Act, the 1945 Act, the Supreme Court opined that it was an unlawful delegation of legislative authority and therefore ruled that unconstitutional. The context of that decision was in response to certified questions sent to it by the federal district court that is dealing with another case filed in front of it. And so the federal district court asked the Supreme Court how it would rule on a state court matter, that is, these two state statutes. The Supreme Court issued that opinion, sent that opinion over to the federal district court, but to my knowledge, the federal district court has not taken any action based on that opinion. So we're waiting to see a couple of different things. One is what the federal district court does with that, and the other is a motion filed by the governor's office with the Supreme Court asking for clarification and requesting that the court clarify its opinion, stating that the current executive orders last through October 30th. So we do not have any further opinion by the Supreme Court on that motion either. Of course, all of this came out Friday evening, and so we spent a very busy weekend dealing with our municipal clients and what this means for them. And there's a lot of opinion and conjecture floating around out there about what it in fact means. In the meantime, and something we expected was local health departments then picked up the ball under the public health code and started issuing local orders. Then MDHHS issued an order as well, limiting capacity in or restricting capacity in for social gatherings and events, both indoors and outdoors. That brings up an interesting question about meetings and how meetings can continue. Some have opined that under the Open Meetings Act, having video meetings such as these Zoom meetings is impermissible under the OMA. We don't believe that it's as simple as that. The OMA does not expressly conclude that video meetings are unlawful. What it does say is that a quorum of the city council, in this case, has to be present at that meeting. So it's not clear to me that present means in an actual physical location together. More importantly, I suppose the capacity limitations as imposed by the Ingham County Health Department or MDHHS puts you in an untenable position of trying to decide potentially which one of those orders you might violate, right? Either the MDHHS order restricting capacity, because if you go over capacity, it would be a violation of the order, or the Open Meetings Act, where if you are forced to turn people away because of the restriction on capacity, it would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So in the meantime, until some of this gets sorted out, I think you're within your authority to continue holding these meetings by remote means. It gives access to the public, as much, if not more, access than what they would have had under the OMA. And anecdotally, I can tell you that in my practice, having done this for now 6-7 months over video meetings, I would argue that having these meetings by video actually increases public access and participation.
Yeah.
And I suppose more importantly, if you were unable to hold these meetings by video, you may disenfranchise those elderly or vulnerable groups because they would have to decide between risking their health in attending the meeting or not attending at all.
Right.
And I don't think that's a valid choice for any of them to make.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. I appreciate that explanation. And I understand that we don't have all the information now, but I, as a non-attorney, but just as a person, would agree with you at that, we don't want to be putting people at risk to participate in the public process. And as as Councilmember Bacon said before, public safety is our #1 concern. And I think that holding these meetings electronically has been good both for that goal and also for public access. To the point where, a few months ago, I even, asked the city manager if we could hold even when we're going in person, have a Zoom aspect or a call-in aspect to our public comment because we got so much more activity. So I appreciate that. Any other council members have any questions on that or comments?
I did have one question. This is a friend of mine who lives in Livingston County alerted me yesterday that the Livingston County Board of Commissioners voted to rescind their countywide mask ordinance, which then would put them in direct conflict with the state health department's orders. I think that has been, for me, one of the most frustrating aspects of this is navigating the intersections of different pools of authority. I'm assuming that the state health department would have a higher level of authority than a county level board of commission, but and obviously we're not, Ingham County is not in that position. We have both of our board of commissions and our health department are fully on board with public safety. But I guess I personally wondered, I'm assuming that that's not going to be the only county in Michigan that does that. And I'm afraid that we're going to run into border issues where we have different capacity limitations and different things like in relatively small areas. Am I right in being concerned about that, or does the state health department have final say?
Yeah, the state health department order is binding on residents in Livingston County as well as every other county in the state. The trick comes in enforcing it. And so what the order does by MDHHS is authorizes local law enforcement to enforce that. Whether local law enforcement chooses to enforce it or not may be a different question in various sectors of the state. But it is certainly still a requirement in Livingston County.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And just as, acknowledgement of that issue, I mean, we do have part of East Lansing that is not in Ingham County. I have a fairly good relationship with some Clinton County Board of Commissioners simply through different regional boards. But I know that we worked with Ingham County to get a fee schedule, and that's currently working through staff and our end to make sure that we have the capacity to issue fees through our police department there. But this might be something we also need to look into in terms of Clinton County, at least for parts of East Lansing that would be under Ingham County or MDHHS orders now. Just as a plug in there at some point, city manager, that we might need to have a follow-up conversation on that.
Yeah, I actually saw that there's a Mid-Michigan association or affiliation of county health boards that issued a press release today that talked about some of their guidance. So I think they might have already taken that step, but I can take a look back at that and see.
I might not have seen that. Thank you. And thank you, our city attorney, for addressing those concerns and at least with the information we've got right now.
Yeah, one of the things that I've told clients and as many people as I can, the Supreme Court didn't eradicate COVID. It's still out there. And so, you need to be careful about it.
Yeah, I would say a layman's term explanation of that is just because people are over this pandemic does not mean that the pandemic is over. And I would echo that message as many times as I possibly can. So our next item, go ahead, Councilmember Bacon.
Just, I might have missed it. Did we have at least limited guidance for encounters with local business and that kind of thing? What's their guidance if they have individual rules within their establishments and that type of thing? Do we have any kind of overlay guidance for them?
Yeah, so actually I'll have the city manager answer this.
Yeah, so my understanding is the county, is Linda Vale issued orders on Sunday, which basically reinforced the existing orders that were already in place, 125 person occupancy or 50%. So all of the basic orders, she issued 4 orders, is my understanding, that essentially mimicked the orders that we had in place before. So I think that basically at this point, and obviously that the issue of the executive order isn't finalized yet, I think that status quo is the rule of the day for us.
Well, I remember one of our primary concerns was kind of conflict and a lot of things around this, and this is just begging for conflict. So I'm just curious if we're going to have any additional measures to support local business, because you can already see where this is headed. So just FYI from 1,000-foot view. So. Yeah,
actually, that's a really fair point, Councilmember Bacon. And city manager, I would ask, I know that our staff has been in regular communication with the local businesses on this. There is probably some confusion that's happening right now within that community on what's going on. And so if we could make a conceded effort, obviously, to reach out to those folks, and I'm sure that's already happening, but especially in our business community, to make sure that they know that it is business as usual in East Lansing, or as usual as this is, that Ingham County issued those orders.
And I can also check to see if Ingham County, because I think they have their own means of communication as well with the licensed establishments and restaurants that they oversee, but I will certainly check into that as well directly.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Email, I'm assuming, back from council as an update on that.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Councilmember Bacon. Our next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. City manager. Sorry. Does anybody want anything taken off the consent agenda?
I just wanted to comment. I don't necessarily want it taken off, but I did want to have a little bit deeper explanation of the police acquisition item. Sorry, my agenda went to sleep. So I don't know.
4.2.
For the purchase of replacement tasers for our department. Obviously I want our police to be working with functioning equipment, but since we are in the middle of a conversation about use of force and police reform, I just want a little bit more information about how those tools are being used. So we can read through it and then discuss that at the end.
Well, we have our new chief here, and looks like he's unmuted. Welcome to the call, sir. Welcome to the city.
Welcome, Chief Johnson.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
Appreciate making you go into the hot seat on your first time talking to council, but welcome.
That's okay. Actually, I'm going to defer to my deputy chief on this one. So he's done all the research and he has a knowledgeable background on our tasers and the history of it and things like that. So I might have Deputy Chief Gonzalez to follow up on Mayor Pro Tem's request.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Deputy Chief.
Okay, good evening. So I just want to begin by giving you a little bit of history on the Taser program at the East Lansing Police Department. We acquired our Tasers approximately 10 years ago, and that was when Tasers originally became used as a best practice intermediate control device for law enforcement. The Tasers that we currently have, the ones that the officers are currently using, are those original Tasers. And the reason we are coming forward with a request for a new purchase of a Taser inventory is because simply those devices have reached end of life. We have gotten to a point where programming changes with the internal electronics just aren't, they're just not available anymore with those individual devices. And on top of that, we're having malfunctions with the devices as well. That includes battery problems where the current batteries simply aren't holding charges anymore. And it also includes malfunctions with the cartridges. In training, because our officers have to recertify with these devices every single year, and we do update training throughout the year as well, we have seen cartridges that either simply don't deploy at all, or they fail to deploy to an acceptable distance. The cartridges are supposed to deploy to about 20 feet in distance, and we've seen deployments as short as 4 feet, and simply, that's unacceptable if we're going to use this device properly. To give you a little bit of background on what a Taser is, it's classified as an intermediate control device by the MCOLS force continuum. At that level, the Taser is designed to respond to what's called active aggression. So the Taser is a device that allows our officers to protect themselves and protect others from an aggressor. Again, I mentioned that the cartridge can deploy up to about 20 feet away. So it is used as a standoff device, which eliminates or reduces the need for an officer to go physically hands-on with an aggressor to either defend themselves or stop their acts of attack against another individual. To give you kind of a point of context, just because, of course, this is a fairly expensive purchase spread out over 5 years. What are the alternatives? Are there, the questions that we always ask ourselves, is there an alternative out there? And prior to having Tasers, our intermediate control device was a collapsible baton, which is called an ASP. It's made of a steel rod that expands, and then there are training methods and there are means by which you use that as an impact weapon. Clearly, you hit somebody with a piece of steel, they're going to be injured. There's no way around that. And so when Tasers came on the scene, a lot of police departments moved away from those actual impact devices to a Taser, which has a less likelihood of causing significant injury to an individual. Looking back even further past what existed back in, when ASP batons were popular, there was a device called a do-right, and the chief and I were speaking earlier today. Those do-right sticks, which the best way I can explain them is they looked like nunchucks, were popular back in the 90s and definitely had the ability to cause some significant injury to individuals. So by updating the Tasers, not only are we providing our officers with an intermediate device that lands somewhere between pepper spray and a deadly firearm, but it also allows them to have that standoff distance so that they don't have to go hands-on as often as possible. I can tell you that, fortunately for us, we don't deploy our Tasers very often. I took a look at the history of our deployments over the last 5 years, and they're very, very few. I think we've had 4 deployments of tasers in the last 5 years. We have had 12 displays of tasers in the last 5 years. And from my experience, I can tell you that, you know, you display a taser and tell somebody to stop their aggressive actions. Usually it helps because people understand what a taser is. And just that display is enough direction for an individual to halt their aggression towards the officer or the other individual. And so, you know, that's why this request is here today. We did do some research over the past year as far as cost, and of course, Taser is a sole source provider, and came up with a quote from the company that you see in your packet today.
Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
Just a slightly remedial question. What does sole source provider mean?
The company named Axon, which used to be Taser International, is the only company that produces these.
So normally in situations, Councilmember Babcock, we have to do a bid process and allowing all vendors, but there's certain situations with like the wastewater plant where only one vendor can supply parts for a certain pump assembly. Similar situation here with Taser.
I have one final clarification question before we move on. The use of force continuum is something that's come up a couple of times, and I do not particularly understand it. But for me, can you define what types of actions would be defined as active aggression?
Quite simply, active aggression is an attack on an individual. So whether that's the officer or an attack on another person, that is what, in very simple terms, active aggression is. It is not active resistance, which is someone trying to run away or someone trying to push you away or push the officer away. It is a physical attack, whether that's with a, you know, with a stick, with a punch, with a kick, something like that.
Thanks, Mr. Gonzalez. I appreciate it.
And while we have you guys here, this is something I probably should have honestly asked during my comments, but City Manager, can we get an update on when the Police Oversight Study Committee will be meeting? I know that we have some dates selected at this point. Is that correct?
Yes, so my understanding, the first meeting is Monday, this Monday at 6 p.m. It'll be on Zoom, so I'm sure we'll be posting that shortly, hopefully Thursday. Actually, I can look to Chief and Deputy Chief for that information. It'll be run administratively out of their office. Obviously, myself, Chief, Elaine Hardy, Human Resources, Shelley Newman will be staff assistants, but the administration will be run out of police administration, meaning the scheduling of meetings and so on.
Great.
And those will be recorded for people who want to watch, or because it's a committee meeting. What's the?
Well, it's a live meeting. I believe that they're recorded. That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Great. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I go ahead with the agenda at this point?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Deputy Chief. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Welcome to East Lansing.
Thank you.
Appointments to boards or commissions. A, Katherine Rifiotis Slivensky to the Human Relations Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2022. B, Adam DeLay to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2021. 4.2, approve the East Lansing Police Department Taser purchase agreement. 4.3, set a public hearing for November 10, 2020 for Ordinance 1477, an ordinance to amend the zoning use district map of Chapter 50, zoning of the Code of the City of East Lansing to rezone the property at 3225 West Road from RA Residential Agricultural District to B4 Restricted Office Business District. 4.4, approve a resolution acknowledging Indigenous Peoples Day. 4.5, approve a purchase of EKG monitors for the East Lansing Fire Department. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
Great. I will look for a motion for approval on these. I believe that was moved by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is that correct?
That was my intention. It looked like Babcock might be trying to unmute, but I can move.
I'll second.
Great. It has been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Babcock. Any comments? I do have one comment, just an acknowledgement of Katherine Rifiotis Slivensky. She was actually the ASMSU undergraduate chair or president of the student government at Michigan State University. I worked with her fairly often when I was just a city council member, and I am still just a city council member, but still, I just wanted to acknowledge that I think it's great that we have some folks from MSU side, that we're so involved in the student government coming into and be an asset to us on our commissions here. And again, an acknowledgement of the resolution acknowledging Indigenous Peoples Day, as I made in my comments earlier. Any other comments on this? Great. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Wonderful. Our next item is our public hearing, consideration of a special use permit application from Walgreens Co. for the property at 100 West Grand River Avenue to allow the sales of packaged beer and wine. I'm going to have staff give an explanation of this, and then this is a public hearing, so we will allow anybody that wants to speak on the issue to go ahead. I believe our staff conduct is, and now I am blanking on it. Is it David Haywood?
Dave Haywood should be the staff. There he is.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we have here a proposal for a special use permit. This is for a Walgreens store on the first floor of the Abbott building at the northwest corner of Grand River and Abbott Road. So this is part of the larger mixed use development. This is the build out of the first floor. The special use permit is not for the store, but for the ability to sell packaged beer and wine. And right now they are only proposing to sell beer and wine. They are proposing to occupy about 7,600 square feet of the first floor, which is about half of the available retail space, and devote 10% of that floor area to alcohol sales. Their hours of operation are proposed to be between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on August 12th and voted unanimously in support of the proposal. The DDA also met on August 27th and equally held unanimous support for the project. With that, I would take any questions.
Any questions of staff?
I do have a question. Mr. Mansour's comments earlier kind of led me to wonder what, and you might not know this, but I'm just curious, what the state licensing system is. So like these, Walgreens has already received their state license, correct?
I honestly don't know if they have their license yet. But it's a good question about that process. I think we've covered this in the past, but we'll go over it again here. The state used to, when they would receive an application for this type of permit, send it to the local jurisdiction for comments and that kind of thing to give local jurisdictions a chance to provide input to their licensing process. They no longer do that. So now they basically will issue a license and businesses can sometimes unknowingly open without understanding the local process. The prior process would have given us the chance to tell the state, hey, there's a special use permit requirement here. Please don't allow them to open until they've got their local approvals. So now permits are or licenses at the state level are being issued. Sometimes before we'd even know about it. And we've seen in the past here that product ends up on the shelf and things are being sold and we're all in a predicament. So that's not the case here. They came in way ahead of time thankfully, we're just in the process of bringing everyone up to speed on this one.
Go ahead.
Out of my curiosity, if you don't mind me following up, just
no, please go ahead.
If there's any proximity considerations at the state level. I think I guess I didn't consider myself to be prudish on alcohol or puritanical, but maybe it's just because drunkenness has been a contributing factor to some of our COVID related stress. And maybe that's making me feel a little bit more down on everything. But it seems to me that we have just a shocking quantity of packaged alcohol being sold within a 3-block radius. And so I was just wondering if there was any consideration of that at the state level, or if it's just more of a license application process, like if it's just filling out the right form. But that, I don't expect you to know that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I have not heard that there are any standards for proximity at the state level.
Yeah.
There are, if I can comment a little bit further about our local standards, there are 2 areas where we have specific standards on this type of a special use permit. The first is that the proposed use wouldn't be disruptive to nearby churches, community centers, child care centers, et cetera, that kind of thing. The nearest one of those is the People's Church, of course, covering 2 of those categories, being a religious institution and a child care center. We did reach out to them and they did indicate that they had no concerns about the proposed permit. The other area is undue concentration. So our standard is that the proposed use and location wouldn't rise to the level of being a dominant influence as a use or location within a given neighborhood. So that's kind of the 2 standards that we use.
Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. A couple of questions. That is exactly my concern, that there's a lot of alcohol being sold in a small radius, and much of it by big box stores. So I guess first, from a planning perspective, what would you consider dominance? I mean, how many outlets of packaged liquor?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, because I think from my perspective, what I see and what I think about that is the sale of packaged alcohol. I mean, they have to walk out the door and then consume it. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say, A, where they got it from, B, would the location have anything to do with the behavior? That would be something that we would have to talk about. That, from my perspective, it'd be hard to kind of link those 2 things.
Okay.
You're thinking more of the standard between, establishments where you'd actually partake in that versus establishments where you'd have a take out kind of approach, linking obviously those establishments that are in a pretty big concentration where there's a lot of the places where people would actually be consuming the alcohol rather than just a place to necessarily buy it and take it somewhere else.
Yeah. But I mean, that's why we take a lot more care in our review of restaurants as opposed to retail sales.
Go ahead, Lisa, and then Councilmember Bacon.
Okay. Actually, I have a couple of questions, so then I'll share with Mr. Bacon and come back. You mentioned that in the past, stores have opened and they've had, for instance, well, packaged liquor is different than beer and wine, right? From a licensing perspective?
Yeah, so there are 2 different types of licenses at the state level. An SDM, specially designated merchant, is just for beer and wine, and then a specially designated distributor is for liquor, spirits. Okay.
And with the city, are there different licenses? Or is it just one license?
It's just one special use permit would cover both of those categories.
Okay. So this was before my time, but my understanding was that when Target opened, it had, the city anticipated beer and wine, and then they had hard liquor on the shelves as well. Is that true?
I'm you're testing my recollection, but I think that might be the case. I don't remember exactly.
Okay. Can the city do anything? Does the city have any power if it so chooses at that point?
I mean, it goes back to the two categories that I just described from our permit perspective we'd have to make a decision about their product levels, or do they rise to the level of being disruptive to the neighborhood? Just the sheer fact that they're being sold, or are they an undue concentration?
Okay. One of my concerns is that I called Mr. Mansour this afternoon. I called him to see how he felt about it, because I know that it's a family-owned business. I am not averse to a good beverage now and then. On the other hand, I wonder how much is too much for downtown. But what startled me was this has gone through the DDA, through the Planning Commission, is now in front of us for a public hearing, and this seemed to be the first he'd heard of it. What kind of notice do we give to other businesses in the area that might be affected by this license?
Well, we have a standard notice requirement of in two ways. First, we publish it in the City Pulse, in the newspaper, a notice of the public hearing, and then we do a 300-foot mailing to businesses and then the owners of the property. And that's for the Planning Commission public hearing, and then we repeat the same process for the City Council public hearing.
Okay.
I imagine that 300-foot radius did not include Mr. Mansour's property.
I would have to look at that. I could look at it real quick while you're talking.
Okay. Councilmember Bacon, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, from that, probably extending off of what Councilperson Babcock's position there with the small business owner. Is there any consideration around saturation or any of that because I'm probably not done having big boxes or new things, and each one with a liquor license that does seem to be terminal for the small. Is there a point of saturation or where that would even be a consideration in the build up to this? It doesn't seem to be, based on what you're explaining, that there is no saturation point. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, are you asking?
Yeah, is there kind of like you said with bars and restaurants, there's a point where there are no more licenses and there are no more that doesn't exist in this scenario, correct? There could, whatever else comes in and has the state, right of way to have a liquor license would have it.
I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think from a state level, I don't think there's any saturation point from their perspective. From our perspective, we'd have to start having an honest discussion about how would we know? I mean, I have a hard time. Well, let me go back to, we had a conversation some time ago about, and leading up to an ordinance that we introduced, I think, our last council meeting.
Yeah.
To, perhaps remove the requirement for a special use permit for these types of businesses that carry just beer and wine. And one of the main reasons is that the state no longer asks for our input on these, and they issue these licenses. And frankly, we had a conversation with them and they said they wouldn't even do any enforcement on them unless it violated their rules. And they don't really, I don't want to say that they don't care about the local rules, but if it doesn't mirror their concerns, they will not pursue enforcement action on our behalf. So if we have a local standard that doesn't match a state standard and they're in violation with us, then it's purely a local issue and most likely won't affect their state license issue. And then, so we carried that conversation a little further, and discovered that we've had very little issues with businesses that have SDM and SDD licenses. I mean, we've had, other than behavior out and about, but we have no idea, is that a result of, purchasing at a specific location, or just the behavior of people who are going to get it, whether there's 3 businesses or 20 businesses. So those are the kind of difficult discussions we have to have when we start talking about limiting the number of these types of licenses.
I just wanted to point out, it just kind of falls into the same, in my way of thinking, it's similar to what we're talking about around COVID. Like, just because the state says okay doesn't necessarily mean it's right for East Lansing. So I just in consideration, and I could see where there could be a tipping point at a certain point with, if every single, with exponential growth that we have right now, there could be literally, a million ways to get alcohol, which, it sounds like there's plenty already, and I'm not a prude either. But it seems to be an exponent right now. I was just curious. Thank you. Very clear.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilmember Babcock, and then I do want to make sure that this is open for a public hearing.
This is kind of a tangential comment. I think there's sort of a broadly misunderstood amount of input. I think our public assumes that we have a little bit more control over the types of businesses that move into our downtown, when really, if somebody, what's that?
I'm going to ask if you have a question for staff directly.
No, this is more of a comment. So I guess, yeah, I can continue my tangent post public hearing.
Yeah, that would be my request. If there's a question directly for staff, that would be what I would request right now, and then we obviously will have a council discussion after that.
Okay.
Councilmember Babcock, did you have another question for staff?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Emily, would you please let in folks that want to talk in the public hearing? Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
No, all good. Happy to toe the line.
Caller with the phone number ending in 963, you are now permitted to address council.
Hi, this is Alice Trigger, 621 Sunset Lane. I just wanted to provide some historical background since I've tracked this for many years. For one thing, I understand the concern about having a ton of places that sell alcohol, but one thing we seem to have learned is that having fewer alcohol sellers would not necessarily mean having less alcohol. In other words, it's not difficult to find places to find alcohol here. And if you were to reduce by 1 or even 2 or 3 or 4 the number of places where alcohol is available, I don't think it would reduce the amount of alcohol being purchased or consumed. What it does result in is the drop of prices, which Mr. Mansour responded to. That's already happening. It's hard to imagine that alcohol could be cheaper than it already is in East Lansing. I suppose it might be the case that if you add one more, the price will drop further. But as I said, it's difficult to imagine you could drop it further than it already is. There's historically been an irregular approach to this issue. And in general, I'm somebody who's in favor of treating everybody equally under the law. So just wanted to mention that, for example, when Marathon gas station on Hagedorn started selling alcohol, they didn't realize they needed an SUP. The city allowed them to proceed until they went through the process. So in other words, they didn't have to stop even though they didn't have the local permit. And that was one of the reasons why when Target did the same thing, Target was allowed to do that. Responding to what one of you asked about, I think it was Lisa asked about the question of whether or not Target was applying for beer or wine or for spirits. Target actually applied under the SUP for beer and wine, but then came forward and said they also wanted to sell spirits. And so they were then given permission for that. So there was that step which felt irregular in the process too, in terms of the application didn't actually reflect what ultimately got approved at City Council. And then Campbell's, which is beloved to me, and I hate to even mention it because it's so beloved to me, has started selling alcohol, beer and wine, and I'm purchasing it there myself, but with no SUP approval. So over and over again, we've seen stores do this with no SUP approval. Walgreens has actually done it the way they're supposed to do it, which is to get approval before they actually bring it forward. They could have done it the other way that everybody else has done, which is just bring the alcohol and ask permission later. I think it's a difficult situation because, as David Haywood mentioned, the state really doesn't care, as far as I can tell, about the local issues. When I called the state for comment with regard to whether or not they cared that Target was selling beer, wine, and spirits without local permission to do so, their response was, that's East Lansing's issue, and East Lansing can enforce it if they want to. So I think one issue that is really at play here is the question of whether or not this is even still a local issue at some level. So that's just the context I wanted to provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily, would you mind letting the next caller?
Caller with the phone number ending in 954, you are now permitted to address council.
I think I was still just in line from when I called earlier. This is Nicole again. Okay, but you know, I appreciate doing all the discussion and just, I guess, 2 cents since I'm on the line. It seems like there's plenty of alcohol around, but you know, I think it's hard for me to hear local business owners worrying about big box stores, because I definitely back that up, and I always try to go to the local places when I can, and I think they deserve to sort of you know, be first in line of where our loyalties are. So, you know, it'd be nice to see, you know, maybe someone like Walgreens, Target, et cetera, be told like, hey, you can sell plenty of other things. We already have local businesses that are, you know, taking care of the people who live here. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let in the next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 145, you are now permitted to address council.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. This is Mike McGill. I'm with Walgreens. I just want to thank the council for taking this up. I just want to let you know that we did go through all the proper processes with the permitting folks, and then with the planning commission, and give them all the information they needed, and get them all the information they needed to those applications. We are going through the proper procedures to get this approved. As far as business-wise, you know, I'd say that you got to give us a fair opportunity to compete with everybody else on this. And the other thing is they do not plan to sell hard liquor. This is just beer and wine. And it's just to complement, you know, our customers are expecting this to be in the store, and from our surveys, and that's why we're asking for it to be in the stores. I don't think we have anything else to add to that, but I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, sir. Anybody have any questions for the caller, as they are the ones representing the...
I did have a question. I'm not sure what your position is with Walgreens, but I wondered what percentage of your total sales you were anticipating the alcohol sales to be.
I don't have that exact number, but it's a small portion of the total sales. You know, the majority of the sales, 70% of the sales, is going to be pharmacy, and the rest will be front end. So if you say 10% of the front end is liquor, right, 10% of that 30% is going to be sales from liquor.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Emily, is that the last caller? I believe that's the last on my list.
There's no one else on the line.
Great. So with that, I will close the public hearing and now reopen this for discussion at council. Mayor Pro Tem, as I cut you off, please go ahead.
No worries. No hard feelings. You can cut me off whenever, as long as you let me talk sometime. So my sympathy absolutely is with the small business owners downtown, but I also don't see any particular reason to vote against this. I do appreciate that Walgreens has gone through kind of a more respectful channel, I guess, than some other businesses. I just wanted to, I just kind of wanted to enter something into the discussion, which is not to this discussion specifically, but I want my fellow council members to think about it. So I think we've got a couple of different ways to regulate the mix of businesses downtown. So one way is with special use permits and zoning and that kind of stuff. But I think, and that is what we have historically done. And I actually think that that has not really done too much in terms of our aim of like creating kind of an interesting attractive mix of businesses downtown. We have we have a really high percentage of restaurants. We have a shockingly high percentage of alcohol package sales now that I've looked at the map that shows all of our off-sale licenses. But I would really like to enter into kind of our priorities, the idea of some more active management of recruiting and retaining businesses downtown. And I don't know exactly how to do that. But I would really, I guess, staff wise, if any of our staff is listening and have ideas, I know I've had several good discussions with our new development and economic coordinator, Adam Cummings. He's very passionate and enthusiastic. But I'm generally not in favor of legislating things. I think it doesn't guide well. It doesn't accomplish our aim. It just creates a higher level of bureaucracy, which is actually the opposite of what we want to do in terms of attracting businesses. And so I think it's time for us to kind of take the other path and look at recruiting the types of businesses that we want downtown and actively retaining the types of businesses that are already established that we want to stay. And one of those things is maybe, I don't know how to, with the state liquor control being so hands off and so divorced from the local impact of those licenses, I don't really know how to do that in terms of spreading that market too thin, because it does seem like the market is not going to regulate itself. My concern is not the quantity of alcohol, but is the level of competition between businesses that's not healthy. In terms of business wise, and the people who are going to win that battle are going to be the people with the largest market share and the largest buying power, and that's going to be the big boxes. And then we're going to end up with a downtown that is, national brands and chain restaurants, and that's not what we want. So although I probably am going to vote in favor of this, it seems fine. I don't think it's going to, I think it's going to essentially be an amenity for the apartment building that it is in the lobby of more than anything else. But I really would like to put our creative thinking caps on in terms of business retention and attraction. So that was my tangent.
Great.
Thanks for listening.
I'd be happy to also talk about that at a later point, especially around the strategic priorities, because one of the approaches is you try to get the building blocks like office or 55 plus or hotels and bring the right people, and then the market moves towards that.
Right.
We haven't had the history of chasing the particular businesses since I've been here. Some of it is it's so driven by the market has pushed. There's been such a strong turnover of businesses. Something closes and something pops up in its place because there's such a strong desire to be down here. But certainly we can talk about that because it would be a new direction for us. But we certainly can talk about it.
Great. Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
Thanks. A couple of things I do know about liquor control. There's a minimum price that alcohol can be sold for. So I suppose having more outlets for packaged.
When you're done, Babcock, but
what? I'm sorry.
There's a minimum amount that liquor can be sold for. There is not an amount that beer and wine can be sold for. The merchants pay the same price, but then they set their own prices. And that's one of the problems, is that the larger establishments are using a much lower margin.
Right. So, but generally speaking, more in the market, in the liquor doesn't necessarily mean lower prices. It's not the same sort of competition that you would get for, say, bakeries selling muffins or fabric shops. I guess I would also look at, and I think this question has been raised before I got to council, as to why we do this. On the one hand, I think there's a value in setting regulations that protect the community. But then if they're ineffective, or if we have no real effect on the outcome, why do it? Do we raise any revenue off this? Is this a revenue, or do we have fines that go with these licenses?
There might be an SUP fee for filing an SUP, but I don't believe there's certainly not a money maker in that respect. Dave,
Okay.
did you want to jump in?
Yeah, there's a one-time fee for the special use permit, which is I think $1,100, but we
Okay,
get one of these maybe a year, right? And so it's not a huge revenue source. The only other thing I can think of that we might get, I don't know if there's a business license too that goes with this, but it's pretty nominal.
And I also think the 1,100 is the planning and zoning fees, which covers the cost of staff working through the process, and really is a cost recovery more than making money when you think of the time.
Right. That would be just like an application fee, like anyone bringing an item before council would face, right? So we
That's
don't.
correct.
So by granting these special use permits, there's no other revenue that comes into it.
No.
Okay.
Good. So I have just a couple of comments on this. It's just that in general, we have a process that was laid out and they followed that process. I think, to Mr. Haywood's point, we're going to be having a discussion on that a little bit later. When is that slated to come back to council? Sorry. The change to fall in line a little bit more with the state statute or the state's guideline.
So it's got to go to the Planning Commission first. They're going to take 2 meetings, so we probably won't see it till either late November.
Yeah. Okay. So I just say that they went through the process. They did what they needed to do. I am empathetic towards the business owners that have a concern over this. I don't believe in our policy right now. And Mr. Haywood, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we really have any mechanism to say an effect on businesses surrounding, you said concentration or undue concentration as the verbiage used, but effect on local businesses around, is that like a tool that, we have in our process to deny something based on at this point?
Well, yeah, so those are the two standards specific to the that type of land use, right? So, and then you have your normal special use permit standards, which are similar. And I think there's one that states that the use shall not materially diminish the privacy, safety, security, enjoyment of residential dwellings in the neighborhood in the vicinity of the site. And you can use those in your decisions about the special use permit, but it gets really difficult when it's a retail sales. People go off site and then maybe consume a certain way, then get caught in the act. How do you know it's any specific land use? And how do we know that limiting the numbers of these would have a material effect on that? And we would have to kind of demonstrate all of those things in our decision.
Right. And I don't see that as something that we're able to do, especially, with this specific item. And so, I'm cognizant of the fact that, if we have a process as a city, as a council, and they took the steps necessary to do it, and, we should be treating folks equally within our city. And honestly, if we want to have a discussion about maybe even altering those rules or I think that's a council decision, but I don't necessarily think that it has to do with this specific application. So I'll be voting yes on this. I'm understanding of folks' points, but I think that more has to do with council policy overall rather than the application that we have before us. And at least that's my understanding. So that's why I'll be voting yes. Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
Well, I would just say that we've heard that it's a fraction of the sales they anticipate to make in that Walgreens. And I'm looking off screen because I've got my other computer screen here, and I'm looking at a map of downtown East Lansing. And now that's back to the larger policy decision. But Walgreens, they just told us it's anticipated to be a fraction of their sales. So I have a hunch they'll do just fine without this. I'm still mulling it. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments on this before I ask for a motion? Okay. I will ask for a motion then on this item. I'll move approval of the special use permit application for Walgreens Co. at the property of 100 West Grand River Avenue to allow the sales of packaged beer and wine. And I'll look for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Bacon. Any discussion?
I have discussion.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to be voting yes on it. They followed the process, and I remember being on Planning Commission when it was discovered that Target was selling liquor and they didn't know that they weren't supposed to be. And I kind of see value in us having our local procedures that we ask stores to go through, and not just they get the state license and so then they can sell the liquor. Because I think with us watching it locally, then we can be aware of what stores are asking to do if they're asking to sell beer or liquor or wine. So I'm a Walgreens shopper. And when I go into convenience stores like that, I might be stopping in for something like chips or toilet paper or bandages. But if I want beer or alcohol, like I would just expect to see it, beer or wine. And so I'm going to vote in favor of it. And I also, like we've been saying, it's minimal costs to their businesses to sell the alcohol. And so, and the last thing I wanted to say is the person that called in from the convenience store, the local business owner, I am thinking about him and still thinking about how to support our local businesses and our stores during this time, and just to keep everybody in business and not just the big businesses that can afford it.
Thanks. Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
No.
Okay. That motion passes 4-1. Thank you, Mr. Haywood. We are now moving on to our business agenda. I'm cognizant of the time. I'm going to request that we take a break at 9 o'clock, at least for 5 minutes, just to let folks do whatever they need to do. So for right now, we will move on to our business agenda. First item 6.1, lot split application. I actually believe that this is David Haywood as well.
Yes, thank you. So this one's got a little bit of history to it, so bear with me here a second. So this is a proposal for a lot split at 3225 West Road. This was originally associated with a proposed medical marijuana provisioning center about a year ago. This was before the Planning Commission. So this lot split would have facilitated the proposal for the provisioning center. And the reason for the split is so that they could meet the separation requirement between provisioning centers. So our code says there has to be at least 500 feet between provisioning centers. And there was an approved provisioning center at 3315 Coolidge, which that property extends all the way over to West Road. So it was definitely within that shadow. In fact, I think it's about 144 feet between property lines. So they had to split off the back part of it where they were proposing the provisioning center so that they could meet that separation requirement. The problem with it was that they, by splitting off a parcel at the rear of the property, they no longer have road frontage. And any business that requires a special use permit is required to be on fronting and abutting a major road. West Road is a major road, but they couldn't satisfy both of those issues. So not being able to craft a path forward, the applicant just kind of disappeared, and rather than let these applications die on the vine, we like to try to either ask that the applicant withdraw their application, or that we would move it forward with a likely denial. So the applicant essentially has refused to withdraw. They did confirm that they're no longer pursuing the medical marijuana approach. So the Planning Commission staff are a little confused why they wouldn't withdraw their proposed lot split. So without any other pending proposal for the property, we're essentially forcing the application for a resolution. And so that's really the long and short of the proposal here. The Planning Commission met on September 23rd, and their action was unanimous to essentially recommend denial. So with that, we're taking questions.
So just as a point of clarification, I imagine there was a reach out to the applicant that this would be on the agenda today. Did we receive any comment back on that?
No.
So again, just further clarifying that the proposal no longer is going to be used for the site that they wanted to do the lot split for. And so at this point, the city doesn't feel it's necessary to, at least, or staff and the Planning Commission are recommending that we do not approve this based on the fact that there doesn't seem to be a reason to. Is that a fair assessment?
That's fair.
Okay, great. Any comments or questions of Mr. Haywood, or and if not, I'll look for a motion. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a comment that I was listening in on that Planning Commission meeting, and the applicant was on the line for that meeting and did not provide any further elucidation. It was actually quite baffling. But it wasn't even clear from the limited comments that he did make that he still even wanted to split the lot at all. So I would say, 100% go with the denial that was recommended by the Planning Commission.
Okay. Is there, and by the way, a denial means that there is a motion and a second, and then that is voted down, just as a point of clarification. So not that there would not be action, but the Planning Commission is actually recommending that we take action on it, and it is a vote in the negative. So I'll look for a motion on this, and if not, I can make it.
I'll move to approve.
And I assume it's a moving of approval subject to the 4 conditions that are on the Planning Commission's recommendation letter.
Yes, thanks.
Great, and I'll second that.
Second.
Okay. Or Councilmember Bacon seconds. I will be voting against this motion because I never vote for something that Mayor Pro Tem ever moves. No. Great, thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed, same sign. Aye.
I'm confused.
So I'll take a point to clarify a little bit. So the recommendation from the Planning Commission and staff, and at least why I am voting against, is that staff, in an effort to make sure that the process has been followed all the way through, has requested that since the project, the proposed project that involved the lot split originally is not coming to fruition, that the applicant either revoke their application for a lot split, or we force this vote, which is the conclusion of that process, right? So they went through the Planning Commission, they went through our staff process for the lot split, And that always concludes with a city council approval on a lot split or denial thereof. And because it doesn't seem like the applicant has an interest in going forward with the project that required the lot split, Planning Commission recommended that we deny the lot split application. That, of course, is a decision of council. Individual council members, staff recommended the same thing. So the motion was in the affirmative. However, I will be voting against because of the reasons listed out by Mr. Haywood. And yeah, and hopefully to conclude the process, you are free to vote yes or no based on this. So I will go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
I think I need to change my vote.
You know what I'll do is I will just ask for a revote. Mr. Homier, am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, I think so. But you know, I have a suggestion, and it's something that maybe
please do.
City manager and I can talk about, because the motion should likely be a motion to accept the recommendation and deny the lot split application.
Okay.
It makes it very clear.
I could withdraw my first motion and make that motion.
Councilmember Bacon, you're the seconder. Are you okay with withdrawing the motion?
No, I was waiting for the proper verbiage to come out that I could vote up or down, and I couldn't really decipher any of that other part. So I'm ready now. If someone makes that motion, I got it.
Okay, so the motion is then withdrawn. Is that correct?
Withdraw the first motion, and then I'll make the recommended motion.
Great. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you say that again, Mr. Hermier?
Sure, it would be a motion to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and deny the lot split.
Mr. Haywood, do you have comment on that?
So the Planning Commission's motion was to approve, and that failed.
Ooh.
So the letter comes with them is just a referral letter, really capturing that. And we've always understood that to be a recommendation. Well, it's not even really a recommendation denial. It's just letting them know, hey, we failed to pass a recommendation to approve.
So the other thing that
changes, I don't know if that changes your, how you want to make tonight's motion.
Yeah, I have not seen the, I suppose there are points I've picked up in this that were reasons why it failed, as stated in some correspondence, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would prefer is that there's because I don't think that when you have a motion to approve and it fails, I don't think that constitutes a denial automatically. So what I would recommend is that there is a move or a motion by the city council to deny the lot split for the reasons as stated at the Planning Commission and by Mr. Haywood.
Okay, I can make that motion.
Great.
So I would make a motion to deny this application based on the feedback from the Planning Commission at their previous meeting and Mr. Haywood's description of the circumstance.
Is there a
second? I can second.
Great, seconded by Councilmember Watson. So I will be voting in favor of the motion to deny. Thank you everybody for clarification there. Thank you for that. Any comment on this? Great.
We get better at our process every time. So thanks for bearing with us, everyone.
All those in favor of the motion to deny, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Great. That motion passes. The application for the lot split has been denied. Our next item on our agenda is Policy Resolution 2021, a resolution supporting 100% clean energy. This is Kathy DeChambeau. Welcome.
Good evening. privilege to be here again with you tonight. We talked about this at a discussion meeting a couple of weeks ago. This is policy resolution 2020-1, a policy resolution in favor of 100% clean energy. This is a policy that I'm bringing forward to you from the Commission on the Environment, specifically the Renewable Energy Subcommittee. And I do want to give a shout out to those members, both past and present, who worked on this for the last basically 2 years since we had our COVID shutdown. And this was one of the items that was coming to the very next city council meeting before that shutdown. So it's actually taken a lot longer than anticipated. Chair Tom Alwyn, Cheryl Schmidt, Jessica Crawford, Elise Anderson, and Mackenzie Fox. Emily, I have some slides. I'm not sure if you can get those up for me. If not, I can just keep talking through all of this. Great, thanks so much. You can go to the next slide. I do want to point out this picture is from our Bertram Park Community Solar Park. And I love the fact that this is a picture of a solar park with snow on the ground. I think that that's a fabulous, fabulous juxtaposition of what we can do with solar here in the state of Michigan. What I brought forward, you can go to the next slide, Emily, please. Thank you. So this policy resolution, this work came both out of the Climate Sustainability Plan and Council strategic priorities. And so I like to remind you that the Climate Sustainability Plan was adopted in 2012. The renewable energy and energy efficiency focus areas are 2 of 5 focus areas in that plan. We talk about climate change a lot, and we bring up the fact that the city was a very early adopter of a climate sustainability plan, both in the state and in our area. And we often talk about the expediency of mitigating climate change. One of the things that we don't talk about as much, or we don't hear as much, is that climate change has impacts on our most vulnerable populations. And the fact that those vulnerable communities are hit the hardest by climate change. And so I think it's important to point that out. We talk about our climate sustainability plan, we talk about renewable energy, energy efficiency, all of those kinds of things. But sometimes I feel like that's a message that needs to be brought forward, and especially in these kinds of conversations. So the Renewable Energy Subcommittee convened in 2018 because at the time City Council had a strategic priority of trying to find a policy for 100% clean energy use and reduce the city's environmental footprint. And about halfway through this process, the Commission on the Environment did come to council and talk a little bit about what they were learning during this process, what they were discovering, and council at the time had some pretty pointed direction for them in terms of, please really work on a policy that will increase renewable infrastructure within the city so that we can be a leader in actually having that infrastructure built within the city. So that's another point that I really want to bring out. If you need a definition of what clean energy is, or renewable energy, or the, maybe not any difference between the two, I put this out here for you. I'm not going to read through all of this. I just like to make it available. And then I also put up carbon neutrality because that's something that we hear often. Governor Whitmer recently announced the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan to be carbon neutral by 2050. So I think it's worth in this discussion talking about that as well. But this particular policy is really focused on that 100% clean energy for the city. Next slide, please, Emily. I did want to give you a reference as the Renewable Energy Subcommittee was working through this process of developing a resolution. They did a lot of research, and there are so many toolkits and guides out there, and some great resources. But the subcommittee found the 100% renewable energy building blocks, a toolkit for a sustainable transition to 100% renewable energy. This particular guide was really helpful, and we actually used the sub areas of this guide to to guide our process and to make sure that we weren't missing anything. So when we reached out to local utilities and we reached out to local energy professionals and organizations, you know, that was very much a part of these building blocks that we were using. The committee did a lot of research into similar municipal policies, and committee members attended some local energy meetings. Meridian Township does an energy meeting, Lansing Area Solar Users Network, and Michigan Energy Options. So our subcommittee members were very busy during this process and really tried to reach out and look to all the areas where they could bring information out about crafting this policy. We had multiple meetings with Lansing Board of Water and Light, Consumers Energy. We reviewed energy data that they provided to us and proposals that they provided to us that had to do with the purchase of clean energy so that we could, you know, increase our purchase of clean energy, and that would be one way to get to 100% clean energy. And the committee consulted with energy professionals, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, Douglas Jester, Kate Madigan, ICLEI, which is Local Governments for Sustainability folks there, and Michigan Climate Network. Emily, you can go ahead and change the slide. So during this 2-year process, there were opportunities that arose that we went ahead and took. So while we didn't have this 100% clean energy policy, it didn't stop us from doing some work and setting up some measures or starting some measures so that once we do have a policy in place, we can hit the ground running and we have the ability to measure as we go. So we earned gold certification in the Department of Energy's Soul Smart program in collaboration with planning and building staff. We earned gold certification in Michigan Municipal League's Michigan Green Communities Challenge in both 2018 and 2019. We've been updating our greenhouse gas emission data and expanded it to recently to include community-wide emissions. And we think that's going to be important moving forward because within this policy, while this policy is focused on city facilities, this policy also speaks to the future of looking at you know, what we can do within the community and how we can begin to craft policy that would include the entire community. We also began doing some benchmarking of city facilities through Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So these are some data points that we'll be able to use as we adopt various strategies and as we start working towards these goals. Emily, you can go ahead and move the slide. So we've taken some strides already, and we've already got some work in progress that would fall under this policy. I showed you a picture of the East Lansing Community Solar Park at Bircham Park. It was 2019 Project of the Year. There are 1,000 panels. There's a wait list currently for 200 additional. That's something that people ask about often. In 2019, it generated enough power, energy to power 45 homes for a year. And it was the equivalent of removing 58 cars from the road and sequestering carbon in 352 acres of forest. We're currently undertaking a feasibility study through Michigan Energy Options for a large-scale solar project here at the Department of Public Works. We've got numerous projects at the WRF, both completed and in process that you've all heard about as they've come online. And those projects are reducing energy consumption from those previous processes by 28% to in some cases, 99%. Another small project that you may not have heard about yet is that Patriarch Park is going to be undergoing some renovations, and the south restroom renovation, that restroom will become completely solar. And we think that's a great demonstration site and a great opportunity there. I have information if you're interested about sort of the number of cities nationwide and the number of cities within the state that have similar policies. But we can move to the last slide, Emily. And I just want to also mention that tomorrow happens to be National Energy Efficiency Day. I think that this is a good time for this conversation, and I would be happy to take any questions or considerations concerning this policy.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Shambo? I do have a couple of comments, but
Mine would be a comment as well.
I also have a comment. I can wait.
great, go for it.
I just wanted to say, congratulations to the team that was working on this. I read through the policy last week when it was on our discussion agenda, and I thought that it was really well considered. I'm, pretty thrilled to be moving it forward, or if the rest of council agrees with me. I am one of the people that tried to get in on the solar park after the wait list was already established, and I'm devastated that I'm not able to be part of that, but I'm hoping that we have something similar in the future where I can jump on board early. But yeah, just send my felicitations back to the team that worked on this. I think it's a really strong policy. I'm excited to be part of implementing it.
Thank you. We'll do that.
Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. As the liaison to the Commission on the Environment and the author of Michigan's first renewable energy bill, I say thank you very much. East Lansing is a leader, always has been, and we've proven it yet again. Thanks to all the hard work from the Commission on the Environment and this team, and especially you, Mr. Shambo. Thank you.
So I really should have said this in my council member comments. This isn't directly related to this, but we did have a good amount of recognition on our water resource recovery facility last week with the EPA administrator actually coming into the city to talk a little bit about, and political in nature or not, the important part about this is just really recognizing all the work that East Lansing and the DPW department specifically are doing to reduce our carbon footprint. And I just like to give the biggest of shout outs that I possibly can to Scott House, Mrs. Shambo, and the rest of the DPW team for all their great work. I think the water resource recovery facility represents one of our biggest investments in reducing our carbon footprint to date. I cannot tout how incredible that is enough. And as a side note, I do think this resolution, well, one, I will be voting in favor of it, but I think it sends a strong message that East Lansing has this not only as a priority for us, but we're also setting standards for ourselves going forward. It's important not only for our community, but for many other communities across the state and across the country to put investment in work like this. I think that, just going through those slides, you could see the amount of people that were reached out to, the amount of time that this took, the amount of consideration that it was taken. And I cannot appreciate that work enough. And I will say I'm very, very proud to be the mayor of a city that has a priority on this. So thank you for the work that you did. I will be voting in favor. Mr. Bacon, go ahead.
Once again, I just want to reiterate, thank you guys for the work on this. And I hear people say that this issue is political. I think it's politicized, but I think a clean environment, it's a human right. And you can always be proud you're on the right side of history, just even being in this position to engage this subject. And just like public health and safety is our number one priority and everything else sits on it, everything sits on the environment. So thank you even for taking this up. And I know it's a heavy lift and there's a lot of really powerful opposition. So thank you for even engaging it.
Thank you.
Right. Any other comments? Questions, staff? All right, seeing none, I will look for a motion. Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
I move that we adopt the resolution on green energy.
That is referring policy resolution 2020/1, resolution supporting 100% clean energy, correct?
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Watson. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Wonderful. That passes unanimously. It is 9:04 right now. I'm going to request a 6-minute break, hopefully coming back at 9:10. Thanks all for being with us. We have a few more items left on the agenda. Thank you, Kathy. Folks back. I'll wait for Ron and Dana. Just to make sure. It looks like we've got Dana here. And Ron. Great. All welcome back. Thank you for being with us. Our next item on the agenda is Ordinance 1493, and that is the city manager. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So the next three items are actually a part of the city's 10-year code review. These items, in addition to zoning items that have already been referred out to the Planning Commission, will be coming back to council at the end of November and December, make up all the items suggested by staff and the city attorney as a part of that process. This one is specifically about the International Fire Code, so I'm going to kick this over to our fire chief, Chief Talaferro, to speak about it, and then certainly him or Scott Weaver can answer any questions on that. Chief?
Good evening, members of council, city manager,
Good evening, sir.
city attorney. Thank you for having us this evening. We are recommending that we move away from the National Fire Protection Association code and to the International Fire Code. Our reasons for this recommendation is that we think it more closely aligns with the Michigan Building Code under Public Act 230. The Michigan Building Code uses as a point of reference the International Construction Code, and they share a council with the International Fire Code. And so those two codes are very similar. And we believe that as the Michigan Building Code adapts new codes moving forward, it will also reference the International Fire Code in that in those recommendations, and that they will essentially mirror one another. The Michigan Building Code, the primary difference between the International Construction Code and the Michigan Building Code has to do with the residential sprinkler systems that are recommended in the International Construction Code, and Michigan Building Code opted out of that particular recommendation. But otherwise, the code is very similar to the International Construction Code, and we just think that this will keep our codes up to date, and it will also align us with the building code that is used throughout the state. I think the other thing that I'll answer perhaps prospectively is that we are adopting the 2015 code. There is a code that will soon be coming out, which is the IFC 2018 code, but it has not been adopted as of this point by the Michigan Building Code. We thought it'd be best to move forward with the 10-year review, and then we can come back and make an amendment or at a later date and adopt the most recent code once that is adopted by the Michigan Building Code. I would like to take a moment and just acknowledge the hard work of our Fire Marshal Raymond Stover and our fire inspectors, John Newman and Blake Holt, who did a lot of review and research with regard to this issue. And I guess if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Chief? Great. Would you, I don't know if this is really necessary, but would you mind going into, I guess, a little bit, you said it was the sprinkler system or the, on residential properties, and why we were making the decision to go with the code that included that versus didn't?
No, that was, so actually the sprinkler, residential sprinkler option in the International Construction Code was not something that the state of Michigan elected to adopt in the Michigan Building Code. And so that is something that I think they have omitted, and that it would not be enforceable, as I understand it, if we went to that higher level of restriction.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. Any other questions? Great. If not, I will look for a motion on this item.
I'll move approval.
Of ordinance 1493.
Yes, sorry. My agenda keeps going to sleep. I need to change my settings on this thing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. Any comment or discussion on this matter? Thanks, Chief Talafero. Thanks to your staff.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you.
Comments. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great, that passes unanimously. Our next item is ordinance 1494, an ordinance to edit a typographical error. Again, George. You're muted, just so you know. Although I will say the explanation of the thing, I think gets to the point.
Pretty much all there, but yeah, another part of the code review, a typographical error, ordinance 1495 adds the letter E to Patriarch Park. Obviously, to say it correctly.
This may be the most controversial thing we've ever done, but I think that we're okay on this. Any questions on this item?
I think we understand it fully.
Yeah. Seeing none, I will look for a motion.
A motion to approve ordinance 1494 to rectify typographical error in spelling the Patriarch Park.
Great. Is there a second?
A second.
Great. That was a second by Councilmember Babcock. Any discussion? All right, great. All those in favor? Oh, go ahead.
Did we think to ask the Patriarch family whether they just wanted to change their name spelling?
Right, they could come into alignment with us as opposed to vice versa.
Yeah,
Yeah, really. They give us a park and they won't change their name? What? Just kidding. I've heard they're very nice folks.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Wonderful. That passes. Again, a similar ordinance. This is to George, 1495, an ordinance to change the duties of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission from reviewing service delivery plan to a review of the operating budget. And I know that I just explained it for you.
Pretty much all I would say is this is pretty much all it is a change of terminology. They've always approved or reviewed the operating budget, which in a sense is the service delivery plan. I think this more accurately states what they actually do in terms of the operating budget and review of it. So that's all.
Great. Any questions?
Seems straightforward.
Great. I'll look for a motion on this.
I'll move approval of ordinance 1495 to accurately describe the duties of the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Wonderful. Sorry, I saw David's cat. I couldn't help but laugh. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Seconded by
Council members, you got to be fast on the draw here with them.
Yep.
Efficient. Seconding.
Any discussion? Great. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. That passes unanimously. Our next item on the agenda is policy resolution 2020-6, resolution extending the emergency declaration requirements of masks downtown. This is staff contact George, but it's really myself and the city manager. George, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that last Wednesday, the mayor signed a continuation of the emergency order, also including the requirement for wearing masks in the DDA district. It was signed before the expiration or during the expiration of the other prior executive order from the mayor. So this has to be reviewed or approved by council within 7 days of it being signed. So it has to be approved tonight or it would expire. So obviously we'd be recommending that council consider and approve that.
Yeah, and I would just say, I don't sign these with light intention, understanding the impact that this has, not only from a symbolic nature of actually declaring a state of emergency, but also the idea that the mayor can put orders in place in terms of mass continuation in our downtown, understanding the importance of public safety, public health. I do believe that this is the right path going forward, at least for the time being. I appreciate those who are abiding by that rule. And I would say that in the beginning, of this rule that we put in place, there was significantly less. We still see issues, and of course, we are not attempting to, have folks have long-term, criminal consequences for not complying with this. Really, this is setting a standard and making sure that folks know what the rules are in place now. And I appreciate our ambassador program. I appreciate the folks in the community that are taking this seriously. I appreciate the business community that's taking this seriously. We frequently, on DDA meetings or meetings with MSU and other folks, talk about different messaging and different, ideas that we're putting out there to make sure that, this is not just followed because it's a rule, but be followed because it's a safety concern and it's a public health concern. And so, continuously adjusting to that is something that we definitely do. But having the rule in place, setting a standard that both on campus and off campus in high population areas, you have to wear a mask whether you're inside or outside, because you'll most likely be in close proximity to other people, is an important step. It's something that we need to have in place. And while I do sign these knowing and understanding the gravity of them, I still understand the necessity. So I would hope that other council members as well understand that and vote in favor of this resolution. So with that, I will look for a motion or our comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of reiterating my former point, just the concern about level of conflict. I think it was really, I'm in full support of actually the resolution. I'm literally just thinking of bars and restaurants and hoping that there's good clarification around state versus local and all that kind of thing. So they're not put in a position to adjudicate any of this within their establishments. It's just a concern I want to have on the record. So.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem.
Mirroring Councilmember Bacon's comments, one of my main concerns with the recent Michigan Supreme Court decision is that it will embolden a certain segment of the population that feels that they have the right to refuse this type of thing. And I think having this in place in our downtown, which is one of our densest business districts, is a way that we can tacitly support the businesses. If we have an expectation of mask wearing outside, then hopefully that will lead to less conflict inside because people will already kind of be assuming that it's expected. And that is one side effect that I hope we see from this. I think we have. Obviously, I'd love to see a higher level of compliance, but I think just in general, this is one way that we can kind of support that message to our businesses.
Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
Again, I'm proud to support this, to support our businesses, and we will take this on our shoulders. So the people who work often, and I've worked at Meyer, often you're not very immediately respected. It's not them, it's us, it's the community. We're putting this on our shoulders. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Councilmember Watson, did you have anything? Or?
Well, I'll just say I'm going to be voting in favor. And just when I think about walking around in that area, we walk around in crowds, typically friends are with friends, and it's harder to just kind of maneuver around folks. And for those who feel unsafe or want to keep themselves safe, it just makes sense that we continue to enforce the masks in the area.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson. All right, I will look for a motion on this then.
Motion. Was that, did you pick me?
Either.
Oh, go for it, Mr. Bacon.
Okay, motion to approve policy resolution 2020-6 to extend the emergency declaration for masks downtown.
So just as a point of clarification, a resolution extending the emergency declaration and requirements of masks downtown.
And requirements for masks downtown.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great, seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any more discussion? Wonderful. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That passes unanimously. That concludes our agenda for tonight. Thank you everybody for being with us. Welcome to our new city attorney. Welcome to our new police chief. Thanks everybody that's on staff that presented with us, and thanks for sticking with us for another long meeting. Appreciate everybody.